Your personal information is being sold online right now, not by hackers, but by data brokers, companies you've never heard of that collect your personal information and sell it. There are hundreds of these sites gathering your phone number, home address, your relatives' information, even your browsing activity, and once your data is out there, it spreads fast. That's why scam calls know your name. It's how strangers can look you up in seconds. And trying to remove your data yourself can take hours per site, with no guarantee it stays gone. Aura does it for you. They automatically find your information and send removal requests to over 200 data broker sites, then keep monitoring to make sure it stays gone, because your data can be relisted at any time. With Aura, you can even see where and when your data was found and removed. The longer your data stays out there, the more it spreads. Try Aura for free at aura.com/hidden. That's aura.com/hidden to try Aura for free.
Welcome back to the Center in the City podcast, a space to pause, breathe, and come back to yourself, even in the middle of a full and busy life. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and in each episode, we explore mindfulness for real life, simple practices, reflections, tools to help you feel grounded, present, and connected to what matters most to you. So let's settle in and let's get centered. Welcome back to the Center in the City podcast. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and I am so glad you are here. In today's episode, I get to sit down with Kathryn Flaschner to talk about what truth is. In this soulful episode, Kathryn shares with us her story of leaving the corporate world to follow her truth and how that helped inspire her to deepen this work, deepen this question of what does it mean to live life truthfully. When I discovered Kathryn's podcast, I knew I wanted to have her on the show because this question of what does it mean to live life truthfully, I think is all of our deep longing, where we can feel most authentic, where we can feel most alive. So if you are somebody who is on the journey of exploring what your truth is, if you're in a corporate job or in a role that you're not super happy with, or a relationship, or even just learning how to fully express yourself and your truth, this episode is for you. So wherever you are listening to this episode, while you're on a walk, cooking dinner, commuting, driving in the car, I welcome you to settle in and let's get centered. Before we dive into today's interview, I want to let you know that we're just a few weeks away from kicking off Mindfulness in May. This is a month-long program to support you starting, deepening, or expanding your own meditation and mindfulness practice. We're going to meet Sundays, an opportunity to have some sacred time to slow down and connect to ourselves. Every week, we'll be diving into a different topic, a different theme when it comes to mindfulness, supporting you learning how to manage your thoughts, be in relationship to your emotions in more skillful ways so that you can take these concepts that we're cultivating in our meditation practice and actually integrate them into your own life. So if you're curious to join us, whatever experience level you are in, I welcome you to check out more information and sign up at wadebrill.com/mindfulness in May. Kathryn, welcome to the Center in the City podcast.
Thank you, Wade. I'm ready to be centered in my city.
I love it. And it's so fun to have just been on your podcast and to now have you in the quote unquote hot seat. And I want to begin by having you share with us, what does being centered in your city mean to you?
It's funny. Today's Monday, and as I told you, as we've talked over the last couple of weeks, I feel like I'm like continually peeling back the layers of how I learned to operate in my life, like over the last decade of living a very corporate structure. And it's interesting to, even in the years since leaving that structure, seeing myself just by default not know any other way to operate. And so it's funny how even with that structure removed, Monday rolls around and I can feel my body like brace up for the week. And today, knowing I was going to have this conversation with you, I was like, what a great impetus to try to enter the week differently and try to like continue the spaciousness that I feel like over the weekend is an example. And so I walked my dog without my phone. And I was like, you don't have to cram and prepare for this. This is not a presentation. So I think that's like my long meandering way of answering the question, which is like when I'm centered for me is less time up in my head, like managing my experience of life and trusting that I'm enough to show up to it. And that feels like in my body, like I'm, I can feel my body grounded and I can feel myself like in this present moment with you. And so it's more of that, like more of feeling super rooted in my full experience of the moment. And I think I'm learning that I have more agency in that, in cultivating that feeling than I used to think I did.
Wow, I love what you just shared. It's this invitation to be in the body instead of managing your life and your experience from your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so many of us, I know myself included, I'm sure many listeners notice how much time they spend managing life in the mind. Like,
Yeah.
how much can I control, or how much can I schedule, or how much can I figure out in my mind before the actual moment arrives?
Yeah. 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 And I can catch it because it's deceiving. Like if I'm up this morning having my coffee, like a moment to read or journal or whatever, I can catch myself if I'm like, start to plan what you're going to tell Wade about, and so I can feel that subtle shift in myself of when I'm starting to micromanage the performance versus just allowing and trusting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think there's a discernment there of like preparation, right? How do we prepare? How do we do our work, right? So whatever, whether we're preparing for a presentation in our corporate job or jumping on a podcast, like we know our bullet points or we know our facts. And how do we also trust ourselves just to show up in the moment and be able to deliver?
I've learned this. It's like I'll never stop learning that difference. Acting has always been in my life since before I became a business person. And unsurprisingly, like as I built this corporate career, I continued just having acting class at nights during the week. And acting for me has always been like the source where I can feel the difference in I'm watching myself say the lines and do it and try to like be like Diane Lane or Meryl Streep or whatever it is versus being me in the moment. And it's been such a revealing craft in terms of feeling the difference and feeling the experience of something versus like watching myself do it. And all that to say, it reminds me how much more enjoyable it is to just experience something versus like white knuckle and watch myself try to do it, quote unquote, right.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to hear because the truth is podcasts. Like when I
Mm-hmm.
discovered you and your work and I just read that out loud, truth is that fucking hit me to
Mm-hmm.
my core. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more. What does truth is mean to you? Like, what does truth, like, how do you know when you are being, living, listening to your own truth?
Yeah. The words scare me, like they intimidate me. And I think some of that is I've stepped into doing this like more so full time than what it was in the past. It we're in such a collective moment where like truth feels like it's in question, like on a macro societal scale. And for me, it's funny, I brought up like my work as an actor. My obsession with it came from that place. And a lot of my formative training was in this technique from this man, Sanford Meisner, called the Meisner technique. But the part of it that was the seed for this, the thesis of that technique is living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. And the way you feel into that foundation is you start with this really rudimentary exercise where you're standing across from another person and you're just repeating back and forth what you feel in the moment. And so it starts with just to orient your attention, like you're wearing a blue shirt. You would repeat, I'm wearing a blue shirt. But then it can evolve to you seem sad. And the person can say, yeah, I'm sad, or I'm not sad. And all that to say, learning that muscle and that felt experience pulled me into this like, oh, there's a truth of what's happening right now in this moment. And if I can meet that, like right now, I'm feeling, a little nervous. I'm feeling alive. And then that's going to evolve to something else. So I kind of became obsessed with that feeling like, whoa, what's here and alive right now? And then how cool to like experience that with someone else. Cause then you can feel like, oh, there's something between us where we're affecting each other. And so that's where my like obsession with it was born out of. And I think, as I said, like I've stayed alive as an actor throughout the last decade, while then simultaneously on a larger scale, like building this identity in this career. And over the last few years, I said, I have a wonderful acting teacher, coach, and friend in LA named John Markland. And I remember saying to him, I was like, John, it's so interesting how when I come to a theater at night, I feel like I'm me, like I'm the true me. But when I'm out performing this job, this career, I feel like I'm not me. Like, what is up with that? And so much of the work he leads artists through is what's underneath the identities we construct. And so for me, I think the truth is it starts with like, what's the truth of where I'm at right here, right in this moment? Can I meet that and honor that and actually then come to discover that there's wisdom in it? And so it's then become this curiosity of like, if we can cultivate that with ourselves, what do we discover about our lives, our choices? And I'm such a the last thing I'll say, I feel like with the podcast, then taking it into like conversations, at first I was really curious about talking to people that I had seen like reinvent their careers. And I was so drawn to like lawyer turned writer, my sister, consultant turned chef. Like what is less so about the pivot headline and more like, how do you follow that? And my curiosity is like, oh, there's like this thread of truth within each of us that's so unique to us. What happens if we pull at that and follow it and trust it? And so that's like the experiment of the truth is.
It sounds like when you're asking that question, like, what is my truth in this moment? Even when you're playing that relational, my terms, relational mindfulness game in your acting class, you're practicing mindfulness, that ability to check in and notice what's here. What can I pay attention to and have a sense of curiosity and kindness to it, to name it, to allow it to be here. So like, yeah, there's sadness here, or like, no, there's not sadness, or it's actually anger with a dash of frustration, or, whatever your truth is. I'm curious for you, when you said to your acting teacher, when I come into the theater, I feel my truth, like I feel more like myself. What is it that felt sense that reminded you or told you that you felt more like yourself in that moment? Like, what did you experience?
The thing that just came to mind, number one is, well, first I wanted to say, you feel it in the body. Like I can feel the exhale, the like literal somatic physical sensation of like, oh, I don't have to like cling on to my shoulders. In his work specifically, and I've seen it throughout many different studios I've been a part of, is like first land, like in his classes specifically, which I've been a part of for the last 3 years, we're spending the first hour like eyes closed in meditation, laying on the ground, like it's like the body arriving. But to answer your question directly, all of a sudden there's a vulnerability, and the feeling is, whoa, I'm exposed, and people can see me and I can see them, and I can't hide anymore. And so that's the feeling. And it's, yes, like many things, it's scary, and it's vitality. It's being alive. And it's so interesting, that contrast with like being in meetings all day, right? And being with people and definitely having moments of connection. But the way I'm posturing in my life is this subtle performance of this part of me. But then I think the contrast became so clear, like, well, all of a sudden I'm not performing, but I'm fully exposed. So vulnerable, the short answer is like fully vulnerable.
Well, it sounds like fully vulnerable and alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vulnerable, alive, not judging myself, just like allowing the mess and the whatever it is. And he catches me, after a scene, he'll be like, how do you feel? I'm like, I feel like unhinged. And he's like, just notice if that's judgment. Like, what if just allowing, to, you said, like, whatever the truth of the moment is, all of it is okay. And I think that container of the theater has become a space where all of it is okay.
I think so many people listening can relate to that question of like, where do I feel like myself?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people who are in corporate jobs or in whatever role they're in can feel stuck sometimes because they don't feel like themselves, or they don't feel like the version of themselves that they want to be or that they have evolved to be. Maybe that role was them 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago, but in the moment, they're not fully connected to it. And I'm curious, when you were then contrasted, right, going back to your corporate role and not feeling like you were living your full self, what was that experience like for you?
I love what you said first, because I think it's so important. Like 25-year-old me that got her MBA and was like loving the era of the girl boss, like she dreamt of the career that I built, that I found myself in my early 30s. And so, part of it for me is like, what I've learned, I would say, is it's not always something's misaligned and then something else is, but like we have to allow ourselves to let things shed. And I think, to your question, and let our dreams evolve. And it just so happens that like the dream I'm finding myself stepping towards now is a dream I had at 18 that I'm like circling back to and using that 10 years to inform my approach. But I love the question, it, how it felt. It's funny. Same acting teacher had me do an exercise where he was like, it was like 3 or 5 or 7 days, just write notes to yourself how every experience throughout your day makes you feel. And I did voice memos, and I caught myself like driving to the office being like, all right, how do I feel? And I would just start crying. Like I was so detached from what I was going to do. And I felt guilty about it. I felt shameful about it because I said, no, this is the thing you always wanted. Like, you're working in this awesome company. You work with incredible women. Like, what? No, want, like, appreciate it. And that self-inflicted pressure does nobody any good. And so it was a lot of me, I think that accountability is helpful to say, like, oh, who was forcing me to do that? It was me. And I think sometimes it was me. And it can be easy to point to that the environment is tricky, because corporate environments are tricky. Like, that's 100% true. And I was expecting myself to show up and love it and appreciate it. And so the feeling in contrast was me just like not cutting myself a break. And yeah, it felt like the experience that, like we just talked about, like all the vitality and aliveness and vulnerability of being in the theater, the contrast was like, just lack of vitality and disassociation and survival. Like, that was a period where I was living in LA, always dreamed of this, but I was like, I was on autopilot. And I'm like, wait, the months and the weeks and the years add up, and I'm not alive in my own life. So direct contrast, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting to be able to name it, because I think so many of us can get caught in these autopilot points in our life where we're just keep going until we hit a wall of, whoa, I'm not living my truth right now.
Yeah.
And I know for me that happened a few years ago where I hit this wall, like, I don't want to be living in Seattle. Like, that was never what I really wanted. And it was something that I just kept going with. And to reorient to that, because when I've noticed for me in my life that when I haven't been living my truth, it can feel like self-abandonment.
Yeah.
And even though there are parts like you were naming, it sounds like there are different parts of you, like parts of you that were saying, hey, be grateful, like enjoy this. This is everything you worked for the last 10 years. But then there are other parts of you that were like, no, I want to be alive. Like, I wanted to be doing this other thing. And I think a lot of people struggle with, who do I listen to? Who's actually speaking the truth? Because our logical brains are so strong and hardwired also for survival. And if we use a IFS model and this idea of us having many different parts and pieces of ourselves, and everybody's needs and wants are valid. It's not like shaming different parts of ourselves, but learning to get curious with the different parts of ourselves. For you, how did you, like, what was your own process to have the courage to leave corporate and listen to your truth?
Well, I love that you brought up IFS, because I listened to the book, and then I have a dear friend, Charlotte, who she like like for an hour, and this is recently, and I'm going through something similar where I'm going to let go of this house in LA that for the last 2 years, I'm like, no, you can make it work. Like, and I'm ready to let that go. But there was all this conflicting tension within. And she helped me see that corporate part of me just wants us to be safe and stable. And the super artist part of me wants the freedom. And you're right. There's like this tending to all of them and figuring out which ones in this season and this season and this season. But to your question, the truth is, LOL, I would have clung on for dear life. And this is now, let me think, it's 2026, like end of 2024 is when I was thinking about it. And the woman that hired me that I worked for, we were gearing up for 2025, like planning that next year. And it was in a meeting where we were talking about how my scope was going to grow in the next year, really lean team, really high expectations, really like intense, just work culture, a lot of financial expectations on the company I was at. And it was this woman that worked for me. Her name's Maureen. In this conversation, she looked at me and she was like, you have a spot here. Like the next year is going to look like this. It's going to be a lot. And she goes, and it makes me emotional remembering that always. And if you are ready for something new, you have my support. And a wonderful coach I interviewed had me talking about this. And she pointed out to me, like she asked, just like you did, what did that feel like? That little inch of the door opening. And I said, it felt like an elephant stepped off my chest. And it was like this coach, Megan Heller is her name. She said, I always tell people to go towards the relief and the freedom. And to your question, the me that clung on to that identity for 10 years never would have dreamed that a year out I would be okay. Like there's so much wrapped up in that for me around financial stability, enoughness, whatever you want to call it. That part of me did not think I would be okay like I am. But I have to give credit to the people that come along and they see it. And she gave me a little inch, and I would not have given myself permission to take that first and most cliffhanging step without that.
Wow. I think you're highlighting the importance of our relationships, like how we don't grow in isolation and how important it is to be talking to our friends, mentors, coaches, because of how important it is for people to ask us questions and reflect back to us so that we can hear ourselves in different ways and try on things in a safer and smaller play space before we go out into the quote unquote real world to put it into motion. And it sounds like that the fact that you even can get so emotional right now and feel it. Like I could see your body language in this moment when you were sharing it, of just that elephant stepping off of your chest and that sense of relief. It's like, wow. And I know I have some clients who would say, because they're so conditioned to like pushing and things need to be harder, that's like, well, why would I choose the quote unquote easier or easeful approach? If I do that, am I not growing? Or am I not pushing to my full potential? Like, what would you say to somebody who maybe has that kind of response or internal dialogue?
The first thing I would say is like, I am you, like you are me. Like I'm very humbled by what I'm learning like live right now. And you brought some of it into focus for me in our conversation on my podcast. I swear to you, sometimes I feel like I have a conversation with a guest and they offer a nugget. And then like a week later, I'm like brought to my knees learning it for myself. Like there's like some synchronicity there. And it's funny, like whatever the thing is for someone, like right now it's the experiment for me of this podcast, but really quickly it's like, oh, but also writing is feeling really good. And I want to produce this short film. Like it's so interesting how important the flexibility is. And I think that's relevant to the question, because the thing I'm learning that is so hard for the me that for 10, 20 years was like effort. If we're like just efforting, we're not always checking in with like where the direction that the ship is headed. And I used to think the only thing that would like move anything forward was just effort. But now I realize like effort without clarity is just exhausting me to no end. And it's a really humbling lesson because even right now, like you and I have talked about this, like the idea of putting a podcast into the world, you can very quickly look at examples online and then be like, I have to pump out 20 clips a day to market every episode. Like there's no end to the effort. There's no end to the effort. And the checking back in of like, wait, what is actually resonating? What are people reflecting to me that is the me being like most of service, most impactful? Because I'm learning just like effort, it's not about more volume, more work. It's like the right steps in the right work. And I'm finding that they say the slow and steady wins the race for a reason. And so it's hard I've only learned that lesson by my body like giving out and showing me that it can't go anymore. And so I've caught myself even in this chapter of being like, wait, no, the point is you're trying to choose differently and discover differently. And I'm slowly collecting the evidence that it is when I take the space to see and think and feel clearly, feel the truth, that, oh, the next step reveals itself. And trust has played a big role in that too. Like cultivating trust that I will be okay if I'm not because now what I'm realizing if I'm efforting constantly all the time because I don't know how to do anything else, I won't be okay long term.
Okay, so circling back,
Yeah,
how do
please.
you, even in your own practice,
Mm-hmm.
because maybe that can support a listener, how do you practice finding your truth so you can get that clarity? And when I say even like finding your truth, I want to even be clear. Like I loved what you shared on social media one day of you were heading to brunch and you
Yeah.
just like popped a squat and your girlfriends are like, oh, hey, how's it going? Right. And we so often can just be like, great, things are good, smile and like, let's get on with our lady brunch. But it's like, to be like, no, things are shitty, things are hard right now, to
Yeah.
be truthful in that moment. So, like, what is your process like internally to check in of how am I living my truth?
Mm. There's always the truth of the moment for me. Like I can stop at any moment and be like, what's happening right now? And because of that practice, I think I'm getting a little bit more clear on when I'm in a little bit of a manic tizzy spiral. And when I'm like frantically emailing 5 people because I'm like, oh, I need to book more guests or something like that. So I say that because there's the checking in with self, but you pointed to it earlier. You just pointed to it again. For me, the most like revelatory, truthful check-ins come when there's one of my people is in front of me. Like 2 nights ago, my little sister called me and she's just asking me questions. And I could feel myself holding back from like the cry that needed to happen. And then it finally went there and it unraveled. And after that, I was like, wow, I feel more clear and more alive than I did for the last few weeks.
And I just want to
Just like,
pause you there
yeah,
because
please.
you've put your hand on your
To my
throat
throat.
for listeners who can't
Yeah.
see this, but right, to
Yeah.
even just recognize, and I've been there too, of where my voice can even get tighter or more
I know.
scratchy than it normally is, but of like where I'm not speaking my truth and
Yeah.
how for a lot of us, it can be in our throat area. Some people can feel it more in like the abdomen, giving yourself that permission to express it.
Yeah. Throat is big for me. Like, for years, my like spiritual yoga friends reading my chakras, the throat is the one. And I just always feel a lot of energy in it. And I'll be like, what am I not saying that's like stuck? And it's interesting. I say that duality between like time with me, but ultimately like someone witnessing me that is the unlock, because I think I'm really good at avoiding that, like what my little sister gave me the other night. Like, let's say like, just like squeeze it out a little bit. And I think I just have come to trust that there's so much. It's something I've learned in the last year. I'm really good at self-isolating, head down. You can do all this work. I went through a breakup about 2 years ago. So it's been a very interesting 2 year period, just with a lot of time with myself. But I have realized this year, spending more time with like my closest relationships, like, whoa, there is so much support for me. And in the lesson has been, it's not something I have to earn or prove that I deserve. Like, it is just here. And it has been in surrendering to that my people are there for me. That has been a paradigm shift in my life, and allowed me to just get more access to me versus, oh, I have to go over here and figure everything out by myself.
Mm. Yeah, I appreciate you highlighting, really leaning into our relationships, allowing us
Yeah.
to be witnessed, to be seen, and how that really can support you feeling your truth. I know for me, I can be a verbal processor. So
Mm.
even just verbally processing sometimes with my husband or with a friend, I will then connect to my truth.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that when I'm not speaking my truth, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, but like if I'm not speaking my truth, I'm like what I actually want for dinner, or what restaurant I want to choose, or
Yeah.
do I want to go left versus right? And if I just say, yeah, whatever, like trying to be easy or trying to pretend I don't have a truth,
Mm-hmm.
that always fucking backfires.
Mm-hmm.
And so practicing our truthing is so important, and it's vulnerable as you shared, and it's courageous. And I really feel like when we live our truth, that's when we're fully living life.
Yeah.
And that's when people actually want to be with us, because we're being more authentic and we're actually tapped into what life is about, not what Instagrammy vibes it
Yeah.
holds or whatever other thing. It's like, no, it's the real richness of life. And yet we live in so many different bubbles, whether it's your corporate job or family systems, where there's a lot of social expectations that maybe restrict us from speaking our truth or living our truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily have any like words of wisdom of how to like live your truth in those systems, because I've tried to do that with certain family systems, and that's kind of backfired in certain ways.
Mm.
And it, yeah, and so it's like not living your truth, honoring other people's truth, and not self-abandoning, I feel like is such a dance in our
Yeah.
world.
And yes. And that made me think, like, the world today feels so hard for many reasons, but one of them you pointed to is it feels like there's so much mirrored back to us that at least I internalize, of like the polished and perfect version of someone's path. And I've been thinking about, like, what is this path, this like true, authentic path? And for me, some of it has been, oh, like, it's not going to be perfect. And there's going to be moments where I abandon myself or I swallow something that's true. And then there's going to be moments like I've experienced even in my own nuclear family, where like years and years of not saying something hard and honest. And then the hard and honest thing comes out. And we're like, whoa, all of a sudden we see each other newly and clearly. And I think I'm coming to appreciate that, like, all of those moments are part of it. Like the moments where I abandon myself and I'm like all the way over here trying to be a perfectionist again and perform this thing, all that is good information to come back to. The woman that first taught me to be a yoga teacher, she drew this diagram and it's really simple. I can describe it. It's like in the yoga practice or whatever someone's thing is, like we have this idea of alignment, like true north alignment. We try to align the body, align our path in life. Like it's this ideal of alignment. But so think of a straight line, but then she drew a big squiggly line on top of it. And she was like, but life is this. Like life is going to have us off of center, off of our truth all the time. And the practice is, oh, I'm out here, come back. And so I'm coming to like appreciate that it's all a part of it.
I love that visual because it's the practice of us being centered in our cities,
Yeah.
the noise, the pressure, the chaos, the demands. It is designed to bring us off center. And it is about returning again and again and again, knowing it's not a static pose to hold. It's something that we do have to flow and live through. So that visual is so beautiful. Kathryn, I feel like we could keep chatting about truth is so many different directions. Where can listeners learn more about you and your work?
I'm in the practice of like figuring out how to share myself on the internet. And so with that, I shared with you the direct link to the truth is it's on all your podcast platforms. It's on Instagram. I'm on Instagram. And then I am starting to write more on Substack, which has been really fun. And then I shared with you my website. The thing that's coming later this year is bringing the truth is to life, like in community. So I'm going to have a retreat offering later in the year back east and then start to facilitate some stuff online, which I'm calling truth circles. So more to come, but I'm in all the places where I just pointed you to.
Amazing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Wade.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Centered in the City podcast. I welcome you to pause here, let everything that was shared just settle in your own mind, heart, and body. And I'm curious for you to reflect here. Where in your life are you speaking your truth, and where are you holding yourself back? Maybe some other prompts to explore: what does speaking your truth and living your truth look like? Have you been on your own journey of finding your truth? Join Kathryn and I on Instagram to continue the conversation. Share this episode with somebody in your community that needs to listen to it. And may we all have the courage to keep listening, to keep honoring, and to keep living our truth. Until next time, stay centered.